In the dating community, virtually everyone has encountered what's commonly referred to as crazy eyes at some point. This phenomenon isn't about some mythical creature preying on innocent singles seeking connections. Rather, it's a behavior or condition devoid of any paranormal or otherworldly aspects, I believe. Regardless of gender or sexual orientation, whether male, female, gay, straight, or somewhere in between, you can find instances of crazy eyes in any community. These might appear completely normal when you first meet someone, engaging in typical conversations, perhaps displaying those endearing quirks that might be slightly irksome, like nibbling on the lower lip, softly brushing hair over an ear, or wrinkling the nose while smiling. These small idiosyncrasies quickly pique your interest. Sometimes, the truth behind those eyes only becomes apparent once it's somewhat late in the game. In most cases, you can emerge from such encounters with minimal damage. Perhaps a few weeks of awkward text messages, or the occasional unfamiliar car parked across the street from your house. However, these situations generally don't persist, except for last year's Valentine's Day incident, which left me wondering if I'd ever venture into the world of dating again. My friend James and I devised a strategy to handle such scenarios, a straightforward alert that we'd arm ourselves with before meeting a potential partner. We dubbed it the abort code. Though it might sound silly and juvenile, we'd both had our fair share of evenings out that necessitated an escape plan. We'd have the message, "How's your mom and them?" pre-typed before our planned rendezvous, ready to send at a moment's notice if things took an unexpected turn. It served as a casual conversation starter, concealing the actual situation if we happened to be dealing with someone who was exceptionally erratic, the type that might snatch your phone away to make sure you weren't texting another person. Yes, that had indeed occurred before. On that occasion, I was technically messaging another woman, my mom, but despite explaining this to my date, whether she was Julia or Jen, she still felt the need to double-check. The evening spiraled downhill from there. This was before the concept of the abort code existed, so I had no choice but to endure the situation with a grin. Following that interminably long night, James and I devised a plan. Having been best friends since childhood, we both took a keen interest in each other's potential significant others. We made sure not to schedule dates on the same day, so we could step in if things went awry. Upon receiving a specific notification, it was time to take action. The initial step involved a phone call, requiring a bit of acting from the person needing assistance. Shock, and perhaps even tears would ensue, depending on the severity of the situation, culminating in having to abandon the date to rush to the hospital as quickly as possible. Most of the time, this strategy sufficed. The person displaying erratic behavior might occasionally offer to accompany us, attempting to provide comfort to the heart allegedly broken by news of a terrible accident. But this wasn't always the case. Ultimately, even individuals prone to irrationality felt uneasy around someone in distress, especially if they had only recently been acquainted. If the initial step proved inadequate, and no all-clear signal arrived within 15 minutes, we'd move on to step 2. This phase required coordinated acting from both sides, as we'd need to make an in-person appearance to authenticate the gravity of the situation. Executing step 3 would make anyone present at the restaurant distinctly uneasy, as our dramatic enactment would undoubtedly attract attention. By the time our improvised theater reached its conclusion, both of us would be practically sprinting towards the exit, leaving apologetic tears in our wake. The sole drawback of having to escalate matters to this extent was that the establishment, whether a restaurant or bar, would be off-limits for at least a year. It wasn't worth the risk of inadvertently revealing our scheme to the regular patrons. Maintaining our cover was paramount. We only found it necessary to employ this strategy once. Her name was Lucy or Lenore, definitely commencing with an L, I believe. The theatrical display we orchestrated seemed to embarrass her, as well as most individuals nearby, yet it accomplished the desired outcome. She didn't even send a follow-up text the following day, indicating that our plan was a success. Step 3, the final measure, would be a gesture of sheer desperation. Although we hadn't had to use it yet, we carried laxatives to each date. Whether we'd consume them ourselves or employ them to influence our erratic dates depended on the circumstances. This aspect hadn't been fully developed as of yet. Apologies for the pun. Regardless, we hoped that the results would effectively terminate the situation, though it was still a speculative concept. Admittedly, this approach might be deemed excessive, but it aligns with the adage, all is fair in love and war, correct? For me, that rationale sufficed. So, approximately 1 week before Valentine's Day last year, a colleague from work introduced me to one of his sister's friends. Well, I should clarify that he was more of an acquaintance. He had only been employed there for a month or two, yet he came across as an amicable individual. Initially, I was hesitant, as I generally wasn't a fan of casual encounters. However, once he showed me a photograph of the girl, I became invested. You might label me shallow, but she was undeniably striking. Dark hair, a tanned complexion, vibrant green eyes, and a smile that could thaw the coldest of hearts. Had I permitted the idea that there might be a reason someone this stunning was still single, perhaps I could have made more prudent decisions that evening. Unfortunately, my logical reasoning seemed to have taken a back seat at that time. Yes, I admit it. I was being superficial. For what it's worth, I certainly learned my lesson and acknowledged the error of my ways. Valentine's Day wasn't a favorite occasion for James, for reasons I won't delve into. Still, I checked in with him to ensure he was available, just in case. As anticipated, he had no plans for the day, so I proceeded to make arrangements. Rainy, the alluring woman in question, and I exchanged messages in the week leading up to our official meeting, and my anticipation grew with every exchange. Our discussions encompassed everything from movie and music preferences to our educational backgrounds, and even extended to preferred intimate positions. She initiated that topic, no innuendo intended. Over those days of virtual communication, I failed to detect even the faintest red flags that might suggest a hint of eccentricity behind her captivating eyes. Fine. I acknowledged that after the incident, I reviewed our conversation and discovered a few indicators, but as I mentioned, my judgment wasn't exactly at its peak during that time. Still, I should have taken note when she inquired about my past relationships. Those women didn't value you. Read one message. You simply needed to wait for the right woman, and similar sentiments. At the time, these statements appeared harmless, but in retrospect, I would typically feel a degree of unease when such topics arose even before an actual meeting. Despite my excitement, I arranged for us to meet at the restaurant. She seemed slightly offended when I suggested this instead of offering to pick her up, but I stood firm on my decision. I had encountered a few uncomfortable car rides over the years as I escorted a crazy eyes individual back home, so this approach was vastly superior to the temptation of stranding someone. Perhaps this perspective seems simplistic, but even in the presence of someone mentally unstable, I was averse to leaving them without transportation. Okay, I admit there was one occasion when I left money for a taxi, but that couldn't be avoided. It was either that or risk having the steering wheel abruptly jerked while en route to her residence. Upon arriving at the restaurant, I was taken aback to find Rainey already there. I had arrived about 15 minutes ahead of schedule, intending to secure a table before her arrival. As I entered, ready to request my name be added to the list, I heard that very detail being announced from somewhere within the dining area. Observing my date's head peeking out from a booth towards the back, I was momentarily taken aback. I managed to muster an awkward smile and a wave while nearly everyone else in the restaurant turned their attention toward me. Attempting to disregard the chuckles and murmurs emanating from the tables I maneuvered past, I kept my head down and my face reddened. Though I couldn't deny that Rainey's enthusiastic waves and grins as I awkwardly approached were somewhat flattering, I was becoming increasingly apprehensive about what the evening might entail. Her spirited display was in stark contrast to my growing unease. She looked absolutely stunning in that sleek red dress, her dark hair cascading onto her bare shoulders. I began, attempting to apologize for being late, but my words were cut short as my dining companion enveloped me in a near-crushing bear hug, effectively squeezing the breath out of me. Though we had engaged in extensive text exchanges, her exuberant greeting caught me off guard. Considering she was even more captivating in person than her photos suggested, my logical reasoning temporarily took a backseat to that impulsive, less judicious part of our brain that occasionally leads us astray. I know, it's not something I'm particularly proud of, but there it is. "It's so lovely to finally meet face to face," she exclaimed, finally releasing her surprisingly strong embrace. Yeah. I responded with an awkward laugh. "You look stunning." "Well, that's an odd way to start." Her smile faded as she assumed her seat. "I'm more than just a pretty face, you know." "Oh, I didn't mean to imply. Oh my God." She burst into laughter that bordered on the manic. "You're such an easy target." "I was just teasing, dude." "Ah, you got me," I acknowledged, suddenly feeling tense and a bit drained. "Good one." Each of her words felt like an announcement, as if she were broadcasting to the entire room. It was almost as if she was putting on a performance designed to make everyone in the vicinity uneasy, including myself. Being in the spotlight wasn't exactly my preference, even in the instance when James and I had to resort to step two. Of course, part of the purpose of that particular desperate maneuver was to create as much awkwardness as possible. Moreover, I always felt a tad more courageous in the company of my best friend, and truth be told, somewhat more arrogant too. As soon as I settled into my seat, I discreetly retrieved my phone from my pocket, ready to send James the abort code at the earliest opportunity. With Rainey staring at me with wide, unblinking eyes, seemingly on the verge of bursting into a fit of laughter, I deemed it best to be discreet for the moment. Needless to say, though I'll say it anyway, I was well aware that I was in the presence of a crazy eyes, perhaps the most intense case I'd personally encountered. As the evening unfolded, my date's gaze remained fixed on me. Even when the waiter arrived to take our drink order, I was growing increasingly desperate for an escape. When I requested a glass of water, using the excuse of an early work morning, Rainey nearly snapped at the waiter, insisting he bring me a Jack and Coke instead. While that might have been partially my fault, given that I'd mentioned my fondness for that drink during our previous text exchanges, I still attempted to offer the waiter, who looked bewildered, an apologetic shrug. The expression he returned gave me the impression that he understood my predicament at that moment. "Water," she remarked, looking slightly disappointed. "Really? I just don't want to be hungover for work. You know, why not just call in sick or something? You're in for a late night tonight, if you play your cards right, of course." When her toes began to caress my inner thigh, her lips curving into a mischievous smile, I almost leaped from my seat. The waiter, who remained nearby and appeared just as uncomfortable as I felt, finally retreated from the table. "I'll return with those drinks," he announced, shaking his head. I glanced at him, conveying my help me plea, before focusing back on the wide-eyed woman whose foot was gradually advancing up my leg. "I need to use the restroom," I stated, springing from my seat before my date's actions left me incapable of standing in public. I caught a fleeting glimpse of her perturbed expression as I hastened to find the restroom. However, the moment I was out of sight, I hastily sent a distress message to James. Even though I knew my friend would wait a good 10 minutes before delivering the prearranged, panic-inducing narrative, I couldn't bring myself to return to the table immediately. I even followed up with several additional messages, underscoring the urgency of the situation. After a few minutes, and still no response from my partner in crime, I grew increasingly anxious about the possibility of being trapped there. Sure, I could have fabricated an excuse and fled if necessary, but given Rainey's conduct thus far, I was convinced she wouldn't make my exit easy. Even the idea of sneaking out while she wasn't paying attention crossed my mind, although it seemed a bit juvenile. There was something about this woman that made me believe there would be consequences for such an act. No, my only reliable option, the only clean way to extricate myself, was the abort code. James had never let me down before. I had to hold on to the belief that he would come through this time. As the 10-minute mark approached, I reluctantly returned to the table. I could almost sense the steam emanating from Rainie's nostrils as I drew nearer, causing a surge of tension to surge through my body. I apologized for that. I offered upon sitting down, avoiding eye contact. "Did I get you so worked up that you had to go relieve some tension?" she quipped, her expression resembling that of a disappointed mother more than an overly enthusiastic date. "What? No. I stuttered. "There's no need to be embarrassed," she remarked, taking a sip of her daiquiri. "It's a common occurrence." But I didn't. I had to. "Whatever, dude. Just make sure you're up for the night ahead." Caught in the headlights of her stern gaze, I felt momentarily dumbfounded as she set her glass down. "I ordered our food. You were gone so long, and I didn't want to wait any longer." "Oh," I responded, choosing not to inquire about the unappetizing dish she might have maliciously requested for me. "Thank you. I really am sorry. Nature called." I forced a chuckle, which was far from genuine at that moment, yet she continued to fix her eyes on me. "Anyway, now it's my turn to heed that call," she said, sliding out of her seat. "Don't vanish while I'm away. It would be rather impolite." With that, she spoke so coldly and strolled gingerly toward the restroom, leaving me slightly stunned. If my thoughts hadn't been racing in all directions, I might have been better prepared for what lay ahead. I remained frozen, staring blankly toward the rear of the restaurant until she began her return trip from the restroom. I had only seconds to hastily send another text to James, hoping fervently that he would honor our emergency plan. "How's your mom? And them?" I quickly typed, capitalizing every letter to emphasize the urgency. I hastily pocketed my phone as soon as I hit send, just as my date settled back into her seat across from me. I offered her a smile that I hoped would convey my innocence, momentarily distracted by the vibrating noise emanating from her purse. As she retrieved her bag and delved inside, concealing its contents from my view beneath the table, she glanced up with more anger in her eyes than before. Looking back down at her purse, her fingers tapped on the screen, and then she placed the bag back on the table. "I could use another drink," she stated, a gentle smile returning to her face. "Yeah," I agreed. "Me too." As we engaged in a more amicable conversation that provided me with significantly less discomfort than earlier, I hoped that the tension had finally dissipated. However, when my phone emitted a notification tone from my pocket, I realized that my situation might be far more dire than I had initially comprehended. Seeing that my date no longer appeared as unhinged as she had just moments ago, I felt it was safe to glance at the message I had received. "I'm sorry," I laughed genuinely as I swiped the screen. "They are fine. How are yours?" James' reply read. Confused and somewhat dumbfounded by this response, I texted back a bewildered "what, man?" before returning my attention to the woman across from me. Her oddly satisfied and slightly smug smile didn't register with me immediately. However, when her phone buzzed from her lap, the puzzle pieces began to fall into place. Once again, she looked down, tapping her fingers across the screen, and then raised her gaze a couple of seconds later. When she lifted her phone from her lap, placed it back in her purse, and set it on the bench beside her, I read the message. "Just focus on the gorgeous woman across from you, man. We'll talk tomorrow." A flood of questions surged through my mind. How did she acquire his phone? What did she do to obtain it? Where the hell was James? These inquiries overwhelmed me so rapidly that my mouth couldn't keep up. Just as I was finally regaining the ability to speak, our friendly waiter arrived, bearing a tray laden with appetizing food. "What's happening here?" I demanded, the waiter's eyes shifting from me to Rainey as he hesitated before placing the plates. "It's our food, dear," she replied with a giggle. "That's how things work in restaurants." Would you like anything else?" the visibly uncomfortable server inquired. casting glances between the two of us. You know what I mean. I snapped. That will be all, my enigmatic date declared, smiling at the waiter, who promptly retreated as soon as she granted permission. How did you get that phone? I inquired, my patience wearing thin. I have no idea what you're talking about, she replied mockingly. Can we just eat now? I'm starving. Bullshit. Listen. She sighed heavily. I'm hungry. Can we just eat? Whatever is going on with you, we can figure it out later. I haven't eaten all day, and I have a headache. Though the burger she had ordered for me looked and smelled tempting, I wasn't buying her explanation for a moment. I knew she had my friend's phone, likely still stowed away in her bag. As the sensation of every pair of eyes in the restaurant boring into me became palpable, I knew I needed to regain control. Whatever was unfolding, I had to play along to uncover the truth. I needed her to lower her guard. With a shaky exhale, I reached for my burger and took a bite, my mind racing to determine the best course of action. I apologize, I said. It was a long day at work, and I didn't mean to take it out on you. Her face lit up with a carefree smile as she reached for her own dish. No, I'm the one who should apologize, she replied. I'm just nervous. I've never felt this way about anyone before. Oh, yeah, me neither, I lied, striving to maintain civility while devising a plan to access her purse. Do you believe in love at first sight? Her wide, unblinking gaze met mine again, her smile stretching across her lips. There was something lurking behind her eyes and words, inducing a cold sweat to trickle down my back. As the waiter returned with another round of drinks, silently placing the glasses on the table, my date continued to fix her unnerving gaze on me. A curious form of panic gripped me, urging me to flee before it was too late. I almost acted on that impulse, right before a sudden wave of dizziness hit me. Are you okay? Rainey asked, concern etched on her face as my head listlessly swayed from side to side and my eyes struggled to remain focused. I feel strange. Lightheaded. My heart pounded in my chest as the truth dawned on me, though my body and mind seemed to be functioning on separate wavelengths. Ricky, my date addressed the waiter whose name I hadn't noticed until now. We need some assistance here. Took you long enough, he retorted. You're sure about this guy? Absolutely, she confirmed, her voice dripping with satisfaction, as my head drooped lifelessly onto the table. I just know he's the one. What did? I managed to utter, but everything faded to darkness. When I regained consciousness after whatever Rainey had drugged me with, my head felt as if it were compressed between twin 2x4s. I rapidly blinked my eyes, trying to moisten them and focus on my surroundings. It wasn't until I attempted to stand up that I grasped the severity of my situation. The moment I sensed my wrists, ankles, and chest straining against the chair I was bound to, my fading awareness collided with the harsh reality of my dire circumstances. Despite the mostly dimly lit room, slivers of light gleamed from behind me. As I struggled to free my limbs, my flesh scraped against coarse leather straps, and my anxiety heightened upon realizing I wasn't alone. James, I exclaimed, louder than intended, uncertain if our captors were nearby. Spotting James' bruised, swollen, and bloodied face slumped where he was tied up, I feared the worst. God damn it, James, wake up. Despite my efforts to keep my voice low, panic fueled my rapid heartbeat, making that a challenge. Relief coursed through me as my best friend began to stir, gradually shifting his body. His slow movement brought a sigh of gratitude, and my lungs eased from tension. Denny, what's happening? He groaned, lifting his head with audible bone cracks. What the hell, man? Shut. Lower your voice. Stay calm, man. We need to figure out how to escape. What's going on? He asked, scanning the room, wincing at the pain radiating from his half-shut, swollen eye and bruised jaw. Do you remember anything? How did you end up here? Who attacked you? I don't know, man. I was at home. No. Wait, someone was inside. I went to the kitchen, and then something hit me. Knocked me out, I think. That's all I remember before. Oh God. When dim lights flickered above us, I intensified my struggle to break free, but the straps held me tight, rendering escape impossible. James shared my determination, evident when a door creaked open behind us, casting elongated shadows across the floor. Calm down, honey. Rainy's voice chimed in as she walked around the chairs to which we were bound, followed by the restaurant waiter. You'll hurt yourselves. Release us, you insane woman. Watch your language. The tall man interjected, striking me across the jaw. Ease up, Ricky, Rainy instructed, laying a hand on his shoulder just as he prepared for another blow. Don't mess up that handsome face any more than it already is. Grumbling, he stepped back to her side. While I hadn't paid much attention to his appearance during our restaurant encounter, I now noticed a resemblance between our two captors. Matching dark complexions, black hair, and large emerald eyes. He towered over her by half a foot, despite her high heels, and was twice as wide. The white shirt, tie, and black vest, he wore outlined muscles beneath the fabric. After his powerful punch, he appeared more beastly than the friendly, almost awkward waiter he had portrayed. Are you sure this is the guy? He snarled, his voice dripping with hatred. He seems weak, feeble. Oh, absolutely. He's the one, the attractive brunette confirmed, her unflinching gaze penetrating mine. What's all this about, Rainy? What are? Have you ever wondered what she saw in this guy? The burly man interrupted, barely acknowledging my words. He's kinda cute, Rainy mused. She always had a soft spot for the cute ones. Who are they talking about? James inquired, still struggling against his restraints. How should I know? These two are unhinged. How did? Another swat from the hefty fist shattered my attempts to rationalize their irrational behavior. The blow hit twice as hard as the last, leaving my eyesight momentarily blurred. Son of a... James spat. If you free me, I'll give you a real fight. Their shared lunatic laughter deepened my sense of their derangement. Their expressions of anguish and hatred morphed into a maniacal display, eyes wide, mouths agape, chuckles resonating while they slapped their knees. That was good. You're quite the comedian. The hefty man chortled, wiping tears from his eyes. James glanced at me, mirroring my bewilderment. At that moment, the realization dawned upon me that we were facing our demise. These two weren't sane. Their twisted minds would never free us with a few sucker punches. No, they were on a mission, one from which there was no escape, even without my partner in crime by my side. Please, let us go, I pleaded, tears streaming down my face. We haven't done anything wrong. We won't tell anyone about this. Just, please release us. I was as shocked as James when Rainy's laughter abruptly ceased, her hand striking his face in a swift motion none of us anticipated. You haven't done anything wrong, she shrieked, veins pulsating at her temples, eyes so wide they seemed ready to pop out. Do you realize what will you be taken from me? I was frozen, paralyzed by the rage-filled expressions confronting us. We exchanged intense stares and an agonizing silence that stretched for what felt like an eternity, my erratic thoughts incapable of grasping the passage of time. Rainy's heavy breathing accompanied her unwavering gaze locked onto my closest friend, while my eyes darted between the three individuals with whom I was trapped. The beefy man wore a cold expression as his gaze toggled between James and me, like a pondering pendulum. Strangely, his composed demeanor was just as horrifying as the feral stance of his companions. Rainy closed in on James, delivering successive blows to his face. Blood spewed from his mouth and nostrils, spraying onto me and the floor. Left, right, left, right. The angry palms assaulted his face, his muffled yelps only punctuating the painful rhythm. "Please, stop," I whimpered, hoping my softer tone might elicit some compassion. "That's enough, Rain," the burly man said, gently gripping her wrist as she raised her hand for another strike. In that fleeting moment, her furious gaze met his stern eyes, and he inclined his head in a questioning manner. Her anger wavered, her expression softened. She clasped her fingers around his, stepping back from the bloody spectacle she had created. Though she refrained from striking James further, the sheer force of her previous attacks had left him with both eyes swollen shut, a broken nose, and split, swollen lips. He struggled to form words, only managing muffled coughs and gurgles. "James," I called, tears streaking down my cheeks. "Please, be okay. We'll find a way out of here, I promise. Somehow." "No," Rainey interrupted, fixing her hair. "You won't. You really don't know, do you?" The burly man interjected. "You don't understand what you did, what you stole from us." I don't. I don't know either of you. I've never seen you before." "I know," Rainey interjected, "but can you honestly say we don't look at least somewhat familiar?" How can?" My words caught in my throat as the hefty man pulled a picture from his wallet, revealing a girl in the photo who bore a striking resemblance to what I now presumed were her siblings. "Do you even remember her name?" Rainey's voice quivered, her hand shaking, as she held a long, thin, serrated blade. I nodded, praying it would be enough. "Say it." Lucy," I stuttered, my certainty wavering. "Try again," she demanded, drawing the blade from behind her back. I can't. Please, don't do this. Say it." "Fine. Lenore." "James," and I cried out in unison as she drove the blade into his thigh, blood instantly staining the floor. "Stop this, please. Say it." "I can't remember." "Okay." As she pressed the blade against James' wounded body, blood flowing freely onto the concrete, I realized she wouldn't listen to reason. But I had to try. My heart raced, the fabric of my shirt practically bouncing from my thundering pulse. My insides churned at the thought of what might follow if I couldn't find a way to stop this. "Listen, it's on me, not him, all right. Don't hurt him anymore. Whatever you want to do it to me. Just, please, release him. I'm begging you." The blade's silvery reflection danced with the overhead light, casting flickers on the scene. Rainey's arm dropped to her side. "I don't remember her name, and I'm so sorry for that. I've made mistakes. I'm not denying that. I understand that I hurt her, and I'd be willing to make amends in any way possible. But she's dead," the burly man choked out, his voice trembling. "Can you make amends for that?" My heart seemed to stop at those words. My thoughts spiraled. Yes, I had humiliated her that night, acted foolishly to escape, but we had only spent a few hours together. How could I be held accountable for this tragedy? Though I attempted to voice these thoughts, I was overwhelmed by the revelation and the horrors this night had unveiled. When I managed to find my voice again, I asked the question that continues to haunt me. How did she die?" "She took her own life," Rainey replied, holding up the blade still slick with James' blood. "With this. Oh, dear God. Why? Why would she do that? Why?" The waiter's knuckles silenced my words, leaving me dizzy once more. "Because of you. Because of what you did to her," he stated, wiping my blood on his shirt. "Me? We only met for the first time that night. Sure, we texted for a while, but it was all in good fun. How could I?" "She was fragile," Rainey said, tears shimmering. "She always was. You weren't the first to leave her heartbroken, but you were the last. She was so devastated when she got home. I couldn't console her." Rainey wiped her eyes, attempting to control her tears. Her brother put an arm around her, trying to comfort her, yet his own tears fueled her emotional outpour. She rushed to her room, and I tried to follow. She yelled at me to leave her alone, so I thought maybe she just needed time. It wasn't the first time some heartless jerk had left her in tears, so I hoped she'd recover. But when I checked on her later, the floodgates burst open, turning the fierce and enraged woman into a sobbing, grieving child. The burning ache in my chest was fueled by her words and the sight of our captors sharing their tears. Yes, her sister was unusual, unsettlingly enthusiastic compared to her text persona, but no one should experience this. When James enacted the first phase of our escape plan, she guilt-tripped me into staying. Every fiber of my being screamed to leave, but her broken demeanor when I mentioned an emergency and leaving compelled me to stay. Even though James joined the scene at the bar a half hour later, since I hadn't sent the all-clear text, I didn't pay much attention to my date. Instead, I played my part to flee like an insecure teenager. Now, I see the picture I ignored, the girl looking devastated by our performance, understanding my efforts to escape her company. Can you fathom the impact that would have on someone, even someone who wasn't already somewhat disturbed? "I'm so sorry," I uttered, avoiding their gaze as I spoke genuinely for the first time since meeting the captivating girl with raven black hair. I truly never intended to cause her pain, to hurt Lacey. I couldn't pinpoint when her name resurfaced in my memory, but it caught the attention of the tearful siblings before me. "I'm ready to face whatever consequences you deem appropriate. I've spent so much time self-centered, never considering." The gunshot that reverberated through the room, nearly deafening me, took a moment to register fully. I found myself frozen, instinctively checking for injuries, before I looked up to ascertain the revolver's target. My eyes followed the trajectory from the waiter's shoulder to his wrist, to the pistol's hammer, and then to the smoking barrel. When my gaze traced its path to the gaping wound on the forehead of my closest friend, I was too shocked to even scream. "Now you can experience our pain," the man's voice cut through. "Understand what it's like to lose someone you love," his sister concluded. No more words were exchanged. No further punishment was meted out. No more spiteful glances bore down on me. As the needle punctured my arm, I continued to stare at the lifeless body of my dearest friend, his vacant stare the last image before consciousness slipped away. Upon awakening in my bed, piecing together the events and the time that had elapsed since I left home took effort. Realizing that 3 days had elapsed since that ill-fated date, I wasted no time in contacting the police. However, they discovered no trace of Rainey Barnes or her siblings. The restaurant had no records matching the description of the waiter who served us that night. Witnesses only recalled fragments of an awkward conversation, a waiter assisting a seemingly inebriated guest, and his embarrassed girlfriend to their car, insufficient evidence for court. Even the man who set us up proved elusive. He had been using an alias and quit his job on the 14th. Whether he was another sibling or an entirely different individual remains a mystery. The house I had spent as much time in as my own was empty, its owner seemingly gone over the past few days. James lacked close family, much like me. That likely contributed to our close bond over the years. With no one to reach out to, no one who might know his whereabouts, the trail was cold. Given the facts, the police could only file a missing persons report. Whether anyone believes me or not, I know what transpired on last year's Valentine's Day. Though I've contemplated seeking out the duo who tore my life asunder, it seems futile. What's done is done. I told them I was prepared to accept their retribution for my deeds, and perhaps they called my bluff. At the end of the day, as the saying goes, all's fair in love and war. It's only fitting that I eventually find myself on the losing side of that equation. Given all considerations, it's probably overdue. As we reach the end of this chilling tale, darkness envelops the screen, but the horrors still linger in our minds. If you dare to explore more bone-chilling stories and brave the depths of fear, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Remember to turn on notifications so you're always one step ahead in this harrowing journey. Thank you for watching, and may your nights be filled with terror.